So I started Hustle Crew when I was in a really bad place. I had just left a startup where I was the only Black employee there, the first Black employee, maybe the last, who knows. And after that job, because I had complained about racism in the company, no one would give me a reference. So I was walking around London trying to get a startup job, and every offer that I got was taken away because they said, we tried to contact your old manager and he wouldn't give you a reference. I remember WhatsApping him, begging him for a reference, and he said, after the accusations you made, I don't feel comfortable giving you a reference. Now, that was a really, really low point in my life, but it taught me a really important lesson. It taught me that I never want my professional reputation to hinge on someone else's opinion of me, especially not someone with a completely different lived experience. Because I was the only Black person in that company, the only Black woman, it was very easy for people to feel like the allegations I was making were not real, were not valid. But if there was anybody else in that room that could recognize how unfair and uncool it is to have your hair touched without your permission and all that kind of stuff, then all of those stories that I took to management would have felt very real and very problematic. And that was really the beginning of the Hustle Crew journey, starting this community. And 6 years later, I realize now just how important it is to have a direct relationship with your industry. All of us are at work because we have goals. We want to earn a certain amount of money. We want to create a certain amount of status, a reputation. We want to build a life for ourselves and our loved ones, and we want to create a legacy. But what's really frustrating is you're always going to encounter gatekeepers, right, on your journey to building your legacy. Whether it's, trying to get a job, you're going to have to interact with a hiring manager. If it's trying to be a guest on a podcast, you're going to have to interact with a producer. If it's trying to speak at a conference, you're going to have to interact with people who are putting that agenda together. So along the way of you trying to reach your goals, of you trying to turn your dreams into reality, is always going to be a person, a human, an individual with the power to say yes or no. And what I'm trying to do over this next hour is give you the skills and give you the tools so that when you are in front of that person and you need a yes, you get that yes. You get that yes. You don't get a no, you don't get a maybe, you don't get ignored. I want to teach you the tools and teach you the tactics that have helped me get a yes to a six-figure job, yes to a six-figure client contract, yes to a four-figure speaking gig, yes to a chance to write an article for the Financial Times, yes for a chance to sit on a board, get a board position. There are so many opportunities that I've been able to get, all because of people I know, all because of my network. And if I can do it, you can do it. This is a really tough time. Over the last few months, people have experienced layoffs, myself included. And one of the things I always have to remind myself is that there has never been a generation of workers in the history of the world that has access to the tools to create the career they want. No one like us. We have social media, we have content creation tools, we have LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. We can become our own brands, our own media platforms, our own spokespeople. And through this work of personal branding, of storytelling, of networking, of manifesting, of asking, we can create the future that we want. We don't have to rely on just one job to bring us revenue, to bring us money, to help us pay our bills. We don't have to rely on just one skill set to secure our future. Because of the times that we're in, we have this amazing opportunity. If we are brave, if we're willing to take risks, if we're willing to fail and learn from those failures, we have this incredible opportunity to grow and keep going. So this is what this series is all about, turning layoffs or any letdown into lemonade, just as I have done many times before. I've been laid off literally twice since 2020, but I still have probably more money and more opportunities now than I did before I got laid off from that first job, because all of these downturns, these letdowns forced me to be creative, forced me to take risks, forced me to ask for things I never would have asked before, set prices I never would have set before. And every time I took a risk and it paid off, it made me more brave and it made me more creative. And if I could do it, so can you. Okay, so in 2016, when I quit that startup where I was the only Black employee, the only Black woman, the startup that forced me to start Hustle Crew because I was interviewing for jobs and no one would give me a reference because they felt I was the angry Black woman that called them all racist. You know, in 2016, I was just another woman in tech. Like I said to you, I was trying to get hired at London startups and no one would hire me. 6 years later, since starting Hustle Crew, I turned down jobs. I have to say no to opportunities to sit on panels, go on podcasts, because I'm asked so often. And if I could do that in the space of a few years, so can you. So what we're going to do is jump into some slides. There's 3 specific themes that I want to cover today in this session, right? We're trying to talk about how to network in a way that's authentic. I don't want you to have to fake it. I don't want you to have to be someone who you're not. You can network as an introvert, network as an extrovert. You don't have to even be exactly like me. You just have to use the tactics that I've used. So I'm going to talk to you about how you build your network, right? Because the more people you know, the more people there are who can say yes to you when you need a favor, when you need a job, a reference, testimonial, whatever. So we're going to talk about building networks. We're going to talk about creating a frictionless ask. Okay, I genuinely believe that asking people for stuff is an art and you need to practice it to perfect it. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. And then I'm going to end with reciprocity. So I'm going to talk a lot about how you actually like build up credit in your network. So you're not always just tapping for it. You're also, you know, putting that value out there, because I think that's also really, really important. And that's something that's really helped me. And hopefully that will leave us about 15 minutes for questions and answers. So like I said, feel free to use the Slido or feel free to use Zoom. But with that, I'm just going to start sharing my screen. So I'm really proud of this picture that was taken at my house here in London. Well, I say house, my flat, because it was a few weeks after I got laid off from my vice president role. So in 2020, I was hired by a Hustle Crew client to come in-house, and it was a newly created role leading on inclusion initiatives. And it was extremely challenging. I'd never been in a vice president role before, never earned a 6-figure salary before, lots of firsts for me. I was often the only person like me in the room, and that brought its own challenges. And eventually my role was made redundant. But I learned a lot on that journey. And of course, I was gutted that my role had been made redundant in the middle of all these programs that I was still delivering, in the middle of these partnerships I was still managing. But what was really cool was that my work as a diversity leader was still very much recognized, right? To the point where I was asked by the Financial Times, who awarded me most influential leaders in tech in 2018, I was asked by them to write an op-ed, write a special piece of editorial talking about how leaders can promote inclusion in their cultures. And I talked a lot about vulnerability, because that's been honestly the backbone of my leadership. I've tried to be as honest about what it's like to be me, what it's like to not always have all the answers. And that seems to really resonate with people. So yeah, I'm really, really proud of that. So this is part 3 of a 4-part series. We've already talked about self-awareness and work-life compatibility, storytelling. Hopefully you've had a chance to join those sessions or even watch the recordings. Today is all about networking. And in a couple of weeks, make sure you join. We're going to have the final part of the Layoffs to Lemonade series, which is all about how to negotiate your prices when it comes to consulting, your business, being offered speaking engagements, you know, being asked to write articles, whatever it is. We're going to talk about that in detail. So I hope to see you there. Here's the agenda for today: building a network, creating a frictionless ask, and reciprocity. So let's jump into it. Like I said, I started Hustle Crew 6 years ago. I was not in a good place at the time. I was desperate for a community of people like me, underrepresented people in tech, who could make me feel like I wasn't crazy, like I wasn't the only person going through this experience of joining companies that, you know, didn't get me, where I was the person saying, no, it's not cool to touch my afro without permission, and everyone else in the room going, I don't mind if you touch my hair. I desperately wanted to be around people who could relate to my experiences. And I started with free meetups every first Saturday at the South Bank Centre in London. And over the next year, it grew into a mailing list. It grew into a company. And I'm really proud of how far we've come. My dream is that Hustle Crew can make people check their bias, check their privilege as often as they check their spelling. And I believe that we can do that through the inclusion education that we provide. So just a little bit of housekeeping. I want to keep this space safe, but I also want to keep it brave. This is a chance for you to learn, and we only learn when we stretch our comfort zone, when we rewire neurons. So anything that's shared in the chat, in the questions, we're going to keep it within the community. Let's just be respectful and sensitive of everything. Talking about money, talking about jobs, all of these things are so deeply personal, rooted in our background, our culture, our upbringing, our identity. So I would just encourage all of us to be, respectful of the emotions that come up and just respectful of the stories that are shared. But I trust all of you to do that. Okay, so let's talk about building your network. I love this quote from Arlen Hamilton. If you have not read her book, it's about damn time. Go ahead and buy it. I think it's on sale in the Kindle store right now, or you can download it from her website. You can buy the hard copy. You can buy it for your friend, your partner, and read it together. But there's something that she says, which is be yourself so that people looking for you can find you. Now, that's really important. When I think back to the startup that I worked at before I became an entrepreneur, before I started on this journey, I was the only person like me. And by virtue of that, I had to kind of diminish myself a bit, like pretend I like all the songs that are playing on Spotify, like laugh with all the jokes. And I was just over time slowly becoming quite miserable. And what I've realized is it's really important when you're building your network to pick places where you feel like you belong. Okay. Now, network is literally just people, it's connections. So you don't have to just build it at business related places. You could be building your network at your yoga class. You could be building your network at your community center. Maybe you literally pole dance every weekend. For all you know, the person pole dancing next to you could be a potential client, could be someone that you could do a really cool project with, a collaboration with. If you're already hanging around people that make you feel like you can be yourself, then you can truly be comfortable around them, you can thrive around them, and you can be excited to talk about your projects and your ideas. The first time I went to a Black tech conference, mega conference, was 2018, Afrotech, San Francisco. I had never in my life before that time walked into a huge corporate event and felt surrounded by people like me. I was literally just like vibing, smiling. It was literally like, those scenes in the movie where it's like you're in your fantasy, the characters in their fantasy, and everyone's smiling at them, dancing with them, high-fiving them, but it was reality. That was Afrotech 2018. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, this is what like Warren Buffett feels like at Davos. Just like walking around and everyone looks like you, everyone's having a great time. You feel so comfortable, you feel so happy. And the amount of connections I made at Afrotech 2018, first time I met Arlen Hamilton, first time I met Ania Williams, first time I met Morgan DeBon, Marlon Nichols, you name it, like the who's who of Black tech were there. And I'm still reaping the benefits of some of those connections. And so that really taught me that it's worth investing in those super unique experiences where you really feel like you're going to belong, because you're going to meet people where you form a really deep connection, where you can support each other honestly and openly. And it's so incredibly powerful and so important to do that. The second thing I wanted to talk about here is don't underestimate the people you already know. Okay, so there could be someone who you knew at school, you didn't get along, you weren't really friends. 10 years later, maybe you're in the same industry. Maybe you have the same interests. Are you connected to them on LinkedIn? You should be. There's no shame in that. Reaching out, rekindling that. University. Maybe there was someone that you're in the same course with, same campus with. You didn't know them then. Fast forward 5 years later, you're in the same industry, you have the same interests, you're in the same place. That is the reason why you go to school. That's the reason why you go to university, to find like-minded people who you can support and uplift in the future. And they can get that same benefit from you. So it might be time, if you're job hunting, if you're getting ready to launch a new business, a new venture, it might be time to go through the social archives a little bit and think about all of these incredible networks, places that you've been where you haven't actually built that bridge or built that connection to. Go on LinkedIn, type in your school, type in your university, find people who are in the same space, who could be beneficial, who could be helpful. and send out that little line and be like, hey, it's been a while. I'd love to hear what you're up to. It looks like you're in this space. I'm really interested in that. Did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? You know, 9 times out of 10, we really struggle with that. 9 times out of 10, people are actually genuinely happy to reconnect with someone that, they have that connection with. And the final thing I was going to say was really think about what you can offer, whether that's stories that are relevant to their work, tips, resources, advice, even your time, even your attention can be really valuable. Hey, I saw you just put out this survey. I filled it out. I'm going to share it with people I know. Be helpful in a way that comes naturally to you. Because then even if you don't get anything back, you're not going to be resentful. You're not going to be annoying. You're like, it only took me 5 minutes, only took me 10 seconds. That was fine. I'm happy to put that energy out there. So yeah, here's some really specific examples to bring this to life. When you are not in the office or at a tech networking event, product networking event, whatever it might be, do you talk about what keeps you busy? Do you talk about your projects, your ambitions, or your job hunt? If not, it could be a good time to start. There could be people who are already around you waiting to think of ways that they can be helpful, support you, bring positive energy into your life. And when it comes to IRL events, conferences, meetups, anything like that, are you still in a lockdown mindset? Now, if you're fortunate enough to be, in the UK like I am, get back into those events. Go on Eventbrite, go on Meetup, go through your email newsletter folder, all those communities you signed up to back in the day, see what's happening out there, get yourself out there and start meeting people and see what comes out of that. I went to a Huckletree ambassadors meetup a few weeks ago. Hadn't actually been to one since before lockdown, but it was amazing. I got to hang out with Gabriella, the founder of Huckletree, David Fogel, who's like a visiting partner at Zinc VC, meeting up with him for a coffee in a couple of weeks because he wants to talk about how he can help Hustle Crew. That was one event. And I'm also speaking at a Huckletree event, getting paid to do a lecture for them. So off of one event, I created 2 opportunities. So it's really important to just get out of that mindset and, be active and get out there. The other couple of things I wanted to say was, really think about all the places where you've spent time in the past and think about how you can access those networks through Instagram, through LinkedIn, through Twitter, through TikTok, whatever platform you prefer to spend time on. Reconnect with those folks because you don't know where they are now, and they could be at a place that you want to be, or they could be doing something that's super relevant for where you want to go next, and you've already got that connection and you've already got that affinity. The final thing I wanted to say was really think about what you are willing to give, even if you get nothing back in return. Hey, here's an article I saw, super relevant, I wanted to share that with you. Hey, let me buy you coffee. I'm going to be near your office next week. Whatever it is, put out what you don't mind not getting back, because it's all in service of your growth, of your development, of you building those muscles to put yourself out there to network and build connection. So that's everything I wanted to say about the first theme, building your network. If there's anything else you were hoping to find out about building your network, growing your connections, please be sure to pop your questions into Slido or into the Q&A and Zoom, and I'll make sure that I get to them. But now I'd love to move on to the second topic, and that is creating a frictionless ask. Now, it's so important for you to think carefully and put a lot of time into how you ask your network for help. Now, I'm someone who's often on the receiving end of a lot of asks. As I mentioned earlier, I'm in a lot of roles. I'm an entrepreneur. I have a podcast. I've written a book. I do a lot of public speaking. I sit on a couple of boards. I've done a lot of amazing programs, for example, with the Mayor of London to help young people break into tech, start their own businesses. I have a lot of mentees. So I'm someone who does a lot of work with, young people coming up in the world, building their companies, building their careers. And it means that I'm on the receiving end of a lot of asks. And it's very interesting because, on the spectrum of, oh, of course I'm going to say yes to this, to, wow, I'm really going to ignore this, are a wide range of different types of asks. Okay. And I want to tell you about the kinds of asks that are really, really, really easy for me to say yes to. So the first thing that people who ask me things where I'm just like, yep, sure, no problem, I'll make that happen, is they put themselves in my shoes. They will literally start a message with, hey, Abba, I know you're super busy, and I saw that Hustle Crew was working on this and working on that. So this will literally take you 5 minutes. Bullet point number 1, this is why I need your help. Bullet point number 2, this is how I need your help. Point number 3, copy and paste this, or here's the task. They make it so frictionless. Literally, it's a 5-second task. It's empathetic, it's compassionate, and it makes me go, yeah, cool, I really want to do that. So what I'm asking you to do is, anytime you want to ask a connection for something, think, how can I make it easy for them to say yes? Because that's what you want, right? You want them to say yes. You want them to say, yes, I'll give you that intro. Yes, I'll give you advice. Yes, I'll go for that coffee date with you. Put yourself in their shoes. Now, that might mean taking a little more time to research what they're working on, research what they're doing, think about where they're at right now, what they're working on, but it's worth that extra bit of time if it means you get a yes. Now, I really like this illustration because it's an illustration about being overwhelmed, which, let's face it, most of us are, right? If you're alive, if you're awake, if you're doing things, you're going to be overwhelmed. And because so many of us are overwhelmed, our to-do lists are overwhelming. There's like life admin up to here, work admin up to here, relationships, personal life, etc. It's really important to recognize the reality that most people are time poor. And not only are we time poor, we're selfish, okay? Like, we're all rotating in our own little worlds, in our own little universes, where we are the sun and you're just the tiny little moons and planets around us. Now, because of that reality, right, you're dealing with it, everyone in your network is dealing with it too. It's really important that you are aware of their circumstances, their priorities, their limitations, their preferences. Of course, people have boundaries. You're not going to be able to predict everything going on in someone's life. You know, if someone's going through something really, really personal that's making them just like incapable of doing anything but the bare minimum, you're not going to know that. But you can do your very best to anticipate a way to ask something that gets you a yes. And it might mean making your ask smaller for now, because now's just not the right time, you know, or it might mean delaying what you asked for. So yeah, I'm just going to go into a bit more specifics of exactly what I mean. Here's some examples. If you're asking for an intro, write the introduction yourself, write it in their voice. Hey, Emma, I really want an intro to this person in your network because I think they're going to want to invest in my startup. I think they're going to want to invest in my startup because, you know, they've already invested in that kind of company. And in this, you know, article, they recently said they're looking for exactly a company like mine. I've gone ahead and written the intro that you can use to copy and paste. I've tried to copy your voice as much as possible. If I don't hear from you in 1 week's time, I will follow up and ask you again, but I appreciate you're really busy. So if you still say no that second time, I won't trouble you again. Put yourself in my shoes. Make it easy for me to say yes. Make it a thing that doesn't take up a lot of my time. You've already written the intro. You've kept it short. You've kept it sweet. You've kept it to the point. If you're asking someone in your network for advice, be specific and show them that you have really thought of the question, and it's a question that only they can answer, right? Not Google. Sometimes people say, hi, Abadesi, I would like to meet up with you and ask you for advice about how to get a job in tech. I've written a book. Literally, I've written a book about how to get a job in tech. It's available for $1 in the Kindle store. Just $1. There's a free chapters available all over the internet, a physical copy with activities and worksheets. In the physical copy, £6. So when people slide into my DMs and say, hi, Abadesi, could you jump on a call with me or come and go on a date for me and tell me how to get a job in tech? I am not going to reply to you, because you can buy my book, or you can read any of the articles that I've written about it, or you can watch any of the videos about it. Now, if you're very specific, hi, Abadesi, I've read your book, I've done all the exercises, I've done all the activities, but I'm now struggling to find a AI-driven e-commerce company with any women of color in the leadership team. Would you have any advice to offer me on how I can find an opportunity? at a company with that profile. Now I want to reply because you've read the book, you've done the work, and you're coming to me with an incredibly specific question that I know you probably can't necessarily answer online. You maybe can't necessarily find all that data. You want someone who's got a bit more insider knowledge to give you the inside track on companies that are truly inclusive, that fit that profile. Now I'm intrigued, now I'm interested. If that's how I think when people come to me with a really generic general ask, then that's probably how loads of other really busy, influential, powerful people think too. So don't ask for general advice. Show that you've already done the research and ask for something so specific, so unique that they are perfectly placed to answer it. If you're asking for a meeting, you want to be, again, in a position where it's going to be easy for them to say yes. I know that you work here on these days, and I am going to be passing through there at lunchtime on that day. Can I buy you lunch? And ask you a question about my pitch deck. Hi, I know that you are doing an event, speaking at a panel this evening at that place. Can I meet you after, buy you a drink, and ask your advice on how I increase the prices at my consulting firm? You want to make it so easy for someone to be like, yeah, sure, I'm already going to be there. It's only 5 minutes. You're buying me a drink. Woohoo. So again, think about how you can make it so easy for them to say yes. Make the agenda clear. I want to meet you at this time for this amount of time to discuss A, B, and C. And in exchange, I'm going to give you that because I really value you. And I know your time is precious, and I know your time is busy, and I know you don't have to do it, but I'm grateful that you want to. So if you look at the bottom paragraph on the slide, one of the things I want you to ask yourself before you hit send on that message is, if I was super busy at home, in the office, why would I care about this? Why would I make time for this? And if you can't think of a compelling reason, just go back to the drawing board and redraft it. Simple. Just go, okay, I need to make it a bit more clear to them that this is really important to me. I need to make it a bit more clear to them that I've really done my research, that I really, really care, that I've now just reached this wall that I feel like only they can help me break through. And I want to show that I'm grateful for that. And I appreciate that it is truly their wisdom, their experience, their position that's going to help me break that through. Please feel free to ask clarifying questions. This time is for you. If there's anything about what I've explained that still feels unclear, or you're just like, okay, I kind of get it, but I don't know, use the Slido, or jump into the Q&A. This is all for you. And yeah, I hope it helps. Okay, cool. So now I kind of want to jump into, now we've talked about creating a frictionless ask. And by the way, last thing I want to say on asking is practice. Practice makes perfect. If I look back to when I first started out my business, I think about the emails that I wrote, how long they were, how they dragged on. I just kind of cringe a little bit. It's taken 6 years of communicating effectively and seeing the results. Okay, that got a reply, that didn't. It's the practice that's made me realize what makes a good ask, what makes a clear ask, what's a subject line that people are going to want to open, how many emojis are too many emojis but just the right sprinkling and amount. These are things that you can only learn through experimenting. So experiment away. Someone asked, how long should we wait to ask about company culture? I would ask about company culture literally like right away. Someone told me something recently, which I think is very fascinating. If you want to know about a company's culture, ask people who no longer work there. Because they're not sipping from the Kool-Aid anymore, and they don't have anything to lose. So if you're interviewing for a company and it's important to you as a woman, as a non-binary person, as a queer person, a person with a disability, whatever it is, right? A person who needs a visa sponsored, whatever it is, if you really want to know if it's inclusive culture, if it's going to be receptive to you, flexible, try and go on LinkedIn and find people that used to work there. They don't work there anymore, but they used to. And then just say, hi, I'm really thinking of going, for this company, but to speak candidly, I've been burned in the past. And I just want to know if this is the kind of culture that, will be inclusive to me. I'd be more than happy if you're willing to meet in person, to buy you lunch, buy you drink, or, if you're willing to meet virtually, um, send you a delivery voucher. I don't know, but like, I would value 20 minutes of your time so much. Let me know. But yeah, company culture is important, and you want to find that out right away. And there are so many other ways you can do due diligence as well. Going on social media, searching the company on Glassdoor, websites like Inside Voices, also really effective. So yeah, I would try and find that out. Thank you for your question. Keep them coming. Okay. So I would now like to move on to part 3, which is all about reciprocity. So one of the things that I did, this is maybe like a couple of years ago, I was really burned out. It was 2020, and companies like Hustle Crew that offer anti-racism training, bias training for the workplace were in demand. And I was trying to make the most of that opportunity because, running a company, especially a company like mine, we're bootstrapped. It's very volatile, especially a niche market, like trying to sell inclusion training to tech companies. I was trying to make the most of that moment. And it was an interesting time because I felt like everyone who I knew was like, oh, Abadesi, I should ask her to speak on this panel, join this event, contribute to this article, speak at my VC fund, speak at my startup, blah, 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 because that's what I do. But it was really interesting because I started to realize like some of the people who are asking me to do stuff like that, like come and do a talk, come and do a workshop, some of them wanted me to do it for free. Ironic, given all the conversations happening during Black Lives Matter. And some of them are people who literally, over the history of Hustle Crew, never, ever, ever replied to me. People who I was like, hey, can you please like promote this in your company, like share this event? Never got back. Hey, can you please, let me know what you think about this? Never replied. Hey, like, I'd love to see you at this meetup, blah, blah, blah. Never came. 4 or 5 years of me asking them to help, asking them to support, and nothing. And then suddenly 2020 comes and they're like, hi, but I see come and do a lunch and learn at my corporation for free. No, okay, no. You have literally built up no credit with me. Speaking candidly, I have no incentive to now give you some of my really limited time. And the reason I'm telling you that is because in that moment, when I was busy, that's how my mind worked. I was like, I want to be helpful to the people who've helped me. And I'm just human. I'm just another person, but I'm sure you can relate. And I'm sure many other people relate. So the thing that I really want you to remember is the most influential person in your network, the most powerful person in your network, the most famous person in your network is probably being asked for favors on a regular basis. And they are in the habit of saying no as a result. So if you want to get a yes from them, you need to build up some credit first. How can you be helpful to them? What stories can you share? And it's not just about targeting a specific person. You want to be building that community. You want to be creating that network through your personal brand, your followers on Instagram, your followers on LinkedIn, your followers on Twitter, your email newsletter, whatever it is. You want to be having that direct relationship with the industry, right? This is how you recession-proof your career. You recession-proof your career because you are an expert, you are a worker, you are a skilled individual, regardless of where you apply that skill. You don't need to be employed to be a good product designer. You don't need to be employed to be a good copywriter. You don't need to be employed to be a good software engineer. You can be building stuff all the time, talking about what you're working on all the time, whether or not you have a job. And if while you are working on those things, look at communities like Product Hunt, look at communities like Indie Hacker, look at Reddit. If in the process of building those things, you're telling the stories, you're sharing the learnings, you're putting good, positive energy out there, you're putting value out there, write those Twitter threads, create those Instagram carousels, make those TikToks, and build up that credit to the world, because those people watching and reading and consuming are indebted to you and they're grateful to you. And when the time comes for you to ask them to fill out a survey about the product you're building or promote your new podcast that you're launching, that they will be ready to return the favor of all that you have given to them. So here's how you put it into action. I can see a question from Anna. Thank you. I'm going to come to that after I run through these examples. And please keep the questions coming. Really appreciate it. So here's how you put reciprocity into practice. One of the things I really want you to think about is what you have been through, because it's real and it's yours and it's power. Okay, you have a narrative to share. The way you are going through your experiences, the way you're moving through your experiences is a lesson for everybody to benefit from, to learn from. I talk about that traumatic startup experience. I talk about trying and failing to raise funding. I talk about winning my first speaking gigs, winning my first clients, because I want it to be easier for the next person, right? I don't want them to make the same mistakes I did. I don't want them to have the same problems that I had. That is the value that I can create, that I can bring into the Hustle Crew community, into the tech community. That's how I have done it. That's how I want you to do it, because it's a sustainable way to build a brand. It's a sustainable way to create a valuable network, to create a community. I want you to reflect on what your strengths are and offer that value in sustainable amounts. My strengths are communicating, telling stories about what it's like to move through this industry. That's why I like my podcast Techish. That's why I like, Hustle Crew's insights. We write blog posts, we create social media content. Abiola, an amazing person on my team, helps me turn these stories into all this different content that our community all around the world can learn from. And we do it in a way that's sustainable to us. We have one newsletter with a new insight every week. We have a new webinar every fortnight. We're doing it in a way that's manageable. We're giving enough free content away that can then be built upon to create revenue generating opportunities. It's also really important to be a fan. Before I met Arlen Hamilton in real life, she knew who I was because I was so engaged with all of her content. Anytime she did anything, I'd be promoting it, I'd be talking about it, spreading the word at Product Hunt. I was working at Product Hunt community team at the time. I would be, retweeting her on Twitter, Instagram, this, that, the other. Same with Morgan Devon, like founder of Blavity, founder of Afrotech, always putting stuff out there. If I think of, Mandela of Startup Gym, Founder Gym, I was engaging with all of her content. So by the time I actually met, they were like, what? I know you. And I was like, yeah, because I've been blowing you up on social media for time. And when you are a fan, people genuinely appreciate that. They appreciate the fact that you're choosing to put your energy into supporting their projects. So you can cheer people on from the sidelines virtually, comment on their posts, engage with their posts. Live Little, Galdem. I was so active on all of the Galdem content online, on social media. And I remember being at the Wing one day and just sitting at a table with her and Charlie Cuff. And I was like, oh, hey, we just got chatting. There was already a little bit of that, online energy that was there. So if I can do it, you can do it. Be a fan, put the energy out there, and that is how you can build up that credit. You can reciprocate the positivity, reciprocate the value, share posts, engage with posts, be a fan, support people's work. If you can continue to actively support people's work, then they will actively support you. I've been doing it for the last 6 years with Hustle Crew, and I have no intention of stopping. It's worked for me all these years, and I really believe that it can work for you too. Okay, so let me jump into questions. Like I said, if you have any other things that you were thinking about just in terms of, how to build that reciprocal connection, how to tap into your network, how to make the most of your job hunt, let me know, because I would love to hear from you. Okay, so here we have a few questions from Slido, so I'm going to jump into those, but let me just start with this question from Anna. So Anna was saying that she got laid off last week due to clashing heads with the only other female in her team who was non-technical, but her manager. Struggling with mental health really badly, felt very unsupported by her, even to the point where she questioned my career in tech. Do you have a suggestion of how to make sure you're working under a good manager? When a lot of companies try to say they support their staff, but then they don't follow through. I thought of asking to meet the manager during the interview process, but still feel worried that this wouldn't be enough. So the first thing I want to say, Anna, is I'm really sorry that you went through that. That sounds absolutely horrific. And as someone who's also had like really bad managers, I just want to make sure that I use this opportunity to remind you of the importance of healing from really, really painful experiences. I was talking to a friend about this earlier. She's on maternity leave at the moment and questioning whether or not she'll go back to her old job because she felt like working with a bad manager is like being in an abusive relationship. And she just felt like I just had so much anxiety, so much pain, gaslighting, all of these horrible, horrible emotions all the time. And I kind of related to that because, you know, or at least I empathized with that, I should say, because you spend so much time at work. You know, some people are spending more time with their managers than they're spending with like their siblings and their loved ones. So when you have a really bad manager, it takes a really, 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 really long time to get your self-esteem back and get your confidence back. And I think that's priority number one. Priority number one is getting back to a place where you're happy with who you are and you believe in yourself, and all the like negative feedback you absorb from them, like, should you even be in tech, blah, 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 is just like washed away from you, where you're just like, yes, I should be in tech. I'm not the problem, you're the problem. So that's the first thing I want to say. Now, how do you make sure you're working under a good manager? This is so, so difficult. One, because people lie. Two, because when you're interviewing, people just want to get you into the job and they will say whatever it takes to do that. So this is why I was saying, you know, earlier, I genuinely think asking people who used to work at that company or used to work at that with that person, but no longer have an allegiance to them, right? No longer have an allegiance to the company, being able to find them and ask them stuff is, you know, really, really important. But there are a few ways you can, you know, get around this in an interview, right? So I love to ask people, what is your management style? You know, what kind of leader are you? And you can also ask them things like, what's your conflict style? Like, I'm just really curious, you know, if you and someone on your team disagree on how to do something, how would you react to that? What would you do? Like, you know, play through a scenario. And you could also say, how important is psychological safety to you? And tell me how you nurture psychological safety in your team. And you can also ask questions like, you know, I read an article that said that, you know, the most productive teams are the teams where managers are really invested in the mental health of their employees. So I'm just curious, as a manager or as a company, what are some of the things that you do to invest in the mental health of your team? But I want you to remember that there is no risk-free job, right? Because people are incredibly complex and constantly changing. And you have to give yourself permission to get it wrong and make mistakes. You know, there are times where I was like, right, I'm going to ask this question, that question, this question, that question. And then I'm never, ever, ever going to be treated badly again. No, you know, that's just unrealistic. There are just bad apples everywhere in the world. Even now as an entrepreneur, I still make mistakes. I try to vet clients. I try to vet my employees, and I still end up dealing with people who make me feel bad, who hurt my feelings, who say horrible things to me, who gaslight me. Even right now, in the last few months, I've been through all of those things. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you can ask the questions, but you also have to be prepared for things to not work out as planned. And it's a very stoic mentality that is going to save you from feeling a lot of intense pain and regret when it doesn't work out. Okay. So, you know, do your best to, you know, find out who's this person worked with before, you know, what's your leadership style, what's your management style, you know, ask them, do you collect feedback? Do you collect feedback on, you know, from employees about managers? What do you do with that feedback? How often do you collect it? How do you put it into action? If you get feedback about a manager treating someone badly, what do you do? Can you tell me about a time you found out that a manager you know, wasn't being supportive? Or can you tell me about a time you received a complaint from an employee about a manager? How did you handle that? How did you tackle it? You can ask all of those questions and they will hopefully paint another picture. But people could lie. and people could distort the truth. So you also, on this journey of taking risks, have to be willing to let things not necessarily like play out as planned, but don't let that stop you from going for the big roles, going for the, you know, big pay rises and the big pay jumps. When people treat you badly, often they're like intimidated by your ambition, intimidated by your talent, the brightness with which your light shines, and they're trying to dim it. And you go into a place of fear where you're like, oh God, I'm really afraid now. Don't let them win. Okay, don't lean into the fear, lean into the courage. You know what? You're strong. Okay, you got laid off, but guess what? You're here today because you're not letting that layoff stop you. Okay, you had one bad manager, but guess what? They're still there in that company, and you're moving on to better and brighter things. So, you know, take heart at how strong you are, and remember that strength that you have as you consider the next opportunity. Tap into that. I hope that's helpful. And feel free to, you know, ask a follow-up or email me if you want more specific advice. So Erica's asking, can you give some tips on seeking references, especially after you or the managers and colleagues you'd approached have left the company? It's especially hard when you aren't sure how to navigate the layoff, quiet quitting environment. Thanks. So one thing that could be really helpful to you, Erica, is thinking about people that you worked with in the past, who you collaborated on a project with, or maybe you worked on the same initiative with, and write a LinkedIn testimonial and ask them to post it for you. So you basically like think of, you know, it doesn't matter if you don't work together, if they don't work at the company anymore. All that matters is that you worked at the company at the same time and you worked on a specific project, you launched something together, you did a conference together, you worked on a partnership together, and write the reference for them, write the testimonial. So you can be like, you know, Erica and I worked on this project and we achieved this results. You know, during that project, Erica played an integral role in doing blah, blah, blah. And I'd be happy to recommend her for a project like that again. Or I hope to work with her on a project like that again. 2 or 3 sentences is all you need. And if you write it for them, so all they have to do is copy and paste it into the LinkedIn recommendation, boom, you've got it. And the LinkedIn recommendation is a reference, right? And if a specific employer you're trying to work with is like, I need to speak to, you know, someone, just be honest and say, listen, like the people I worked the closest with, you know, or the people who I, you know, collaborated with to achieve results no longer work at that company. Are you still happy to speak to them? Everyone knows that layoffs are happening. Everyone knows that it's been a crazy last few years. So I don't think it's necessarily going to reflect badly on you. So I think, you know, just be honest, but do as much as you can to make your LinkedIn profile really pop. And the best way to do that is to just like write the LinkedIn testimonials for people so, you know, they can copy and paste it. I hope that helps. So someone asked, what would you recommend for delivering a stronger personal pitch for interviews at networking events? One of the things that I got really into the habit of doing, especially in the early days of Hustle Crew, when I was like going to pitching nights and stuff, was practicing in front of a mirror. It's incredibly self-conscious, obviously, and incredibly awkward and uncomfortable. But because it's so uncomfortable, it forces you to come up with something that's like really like positive and short. And I think that's ultimately what it's all about. You just want to be yourself. You want to be like, hey, you know, I'm so-and-so, I'm interested in this. What's your story? What are you working on? What's keeping you busy? People like talking about themselves. So I feel like it's not even about a personal pitch so much as it is about an icebreaker where you can then move on to a question that you ask the person. Like no one wants to be at a networking event, you know, talking, and someone just like inserts themselves into the space and then does like a Shakespearean monologue for 10 minutes. Like, you know, lo and behold, blah, blah, like, no, right? Your personal pitch is just, it's just like a little icebreaker. Hey, blah, blah, blah. Oh, cool. Like, I'm interested in XYZ. These are the last few things I worked on. You can do that in 10 or 15, 20 seconds. So yeah, if you want a strong personal pitch for networking events, for interviews, stand in front of the mirror and pitch to yourself, pitch to your face, see what you look like, hear what you sound like, record yourself. And in the process of doing that, you're going to get better. And there's a reason why athletes watch recordings of themselves. There's a reason why celebrities, performers, Beyonce watch recordings of themselves. You can only get stronger or better when you review the evidence. So review the evidence and keep perfecting it. Another thing that you can do is actually like listen to podcasts like The Pitch, This Week in Startups, and actually How I Built This, you know, all these amazing business podcasts, and hear how people introduce themselves. Like, go on these cool interview podcasts, Brene Brown's amazing podcast, you know, The Antidote. Listen to how people are introduced and how people are introduced themselves. What are the key words they use? What are the, you know, things that they're mentioning? And copy that for yourself. Francisco asks, should you tell your future employer the complete story of the mishap you had with your previous manager? That's really interesting. So I genuinely believe you don't have like a second chance to make a first impression. And you run the risk of being seen in a negative light if your potential new employer has this story where you're like, oh my God, then this happened to me, then this happened to me, then that person, blah, 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 blah. Because you have to remember, your manager isn't there to tell the story. And generally speaking, it's never like a risk-free move to tell a one-sided story, right? Because everyone knows there's two sides to a story. So my thinking on that is, let's say I just hired someone, right? And they're like, oh, I had a really bad experience with my last manager. Oh, okay, I'm really sorry to hear that. If they then go into a monologue about, and then they did this and then they did that, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm hearing a lot about your side of the story, but I'm not hearing their side of the story. Even if it was a really bad experience, I might have a red flag go up where I'm just like, wow, okay, you know, this person seems really hung up on that experience, on that issue. Of course, you want to be authentic. Of course, you want to be real, but you also want to be really positive, right? So Jeff Bezos famously said that he asks people in interviews, are you an optimist or a pessimist? And if anyone ever says I'm a pessimist, he doesn't hire them, because he wants to work with optimistic people, because optimistic people always see the bright side of things. And that's what I'm thinking of when I'm answering your question, right? If you're just like, oh gosh, should I tell them the complete story of the mishap I had with my manager? The complete story? I mean, give them the highlights, give them like, you know, the top line stuff. But if you end up going into like really minute detail, quite negative stuff, I'm going to guess, they might then see you as a negative person because they're only getting one side of the story. So it's a bit of a risky move. And you know, what people value is self-awareness. What people value is positivity. What people value is optimism. So I would tell the story in a way that shows what you've learned from that, how you've grown from that, and why you're excited about it. But you don't want to tell the story in a way where you've got an axe to grind, it's a personal vendetta, because then that person's like, shit, if I ever piss you off, you're going to go tell someone that story about me. So it's a very delicate line to cross. And, you know, you should be thinking about what, you know, getting hired, right? Like I said at the beginning, how do you get that person to say yes? And if you tell a really, you know, negative story from one side of the story, it could raise some red flags. So it's a bit of a risky move. That's just my advice on that. You know, tell the parts of the story that matter for the point in your journey that you're at. That would be my advice. Okay, let me jump into Slido. How do you manage awkwardness in networking situations? Call it out. I was at that networking event. Like I said, I hadn't been to a networking event in ages, and I was just like, oh my God, it's so weird. Or like, not on the screen, we're in person. I genuinely feel like there are more awkward people than not awkward people. So why are we always talking about like awkwardness like it's a bad thing? Awkwardness is literally the default. The only reason we don't think awkwardness is a default is because we watch too much TV and we think TV is reality. That's literally like take 500, okay? That like perfectly smooth scene of like people meeting and like hanging out and like doing their thing on your show or your movie, and you're like, oh my God, they're so natural. They have done that take hundreds of times. So awkward is the default. Everyone's awkward. So don't worry about managing your awkwardness. Just lean into your awkwardness. Embrace the awkwardness. Oh my God, this is so awkward, trying to interrupt a conversation. Everyone else is going to be like, I know, right? Yeah, great. So yeah, just own it. Someone else asked, how do you approach people in your network that you have not spoken to in a long time? Two different ways to do this. One of the ways you can do it is be the fan. Cheer from the sidelines, engage with their stuff, and then go in like, hey, I've really been enjoying everything you've been putting out recently, blah, 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 blah. Or the other thing you can do is just call it out. hey, it's literally been 3 years since we spoke, but I noticed you've been working on this. I've noticed you've been working on that. I'd really like to, reconnect. Someone said, is networking and cutting the small talk compatible? It just depends on your audience, right? Like, we're all different people. Some people hate small talk. You catch someone at the end of a panel, they're about to run out, but you really want to ask them one question. That's not the time to ask if they have a cat, and if they do, what it's called. That's the time to go, I know you're rushing out. You probably only have 5 minutes. I'm asking you XYZ. But if you're at a mixer, having cocktails, everyone's a bit, tipsy, having a good time, and you just come in and go, I recognize you from Facebook. I need this, that might be a bit intense. So context dependent, networking, cutting to the chase versus small talk, context dependent, person dependent. How do you maintain the connection over long periods of time? It's like what I was saying about being a fan. Just be a fan, engage, cheer from the sidelines, do what you can, reply here and there, subscribe to the newsletter, comment on their posts, invite them to stuff. It's like, a fire that's about to burn, but every now and then you poke it a little bit, add some more wood. You get the metaphor, just keep it going. How do you maintain the connection? Oh no, I just asked that. How do you share your past experiences without feeling you'll, piss people off that know it's about them? Okay, so literally, I have spent the last 6 years talking about the startup I used to work at. Some of those people don't talk to me. I don't care. Some of them do. I mean, it's a very personal choice. But at the end of the day, it's your story, right? And I mean, I'm not putting them on blast, but I'm just saying what happened to me. And they were the people that were involved in the things that happened to me. I've been okay, but it's up to you to make that call. But I think there are some classy ways to do it. You don't have to like name them in full and drop their, phone number and address. You also don't need to be explicit about where you were. You can just say what happened and the circumstances. But like I said, it's a very personal choice. But at the end of the day, like, it's your story, it's your power, and it's your life. So someone said, as a woman, how do you know if a man is willing to support your career or just trying to get a quotation marks favor from us? My theory is, if they ask for your phone number, not your email, I just categorize them as a creep. Now, this is a very, very blunt definition, but what I noticed when I first started doing Hustle Crew, and mind you, this was 6 years ago, so maybe the world's changed, was when men were like, oh, I'd really like to blah, 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 what's your email? I'd be like, cool, give them my email. And most of the time, they genuinely just wanted to help me. But when people were like, oh yeah, I'll help you, blah, 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 what's your number? I'd be like, okay, give them my number. 9 times out of 10, there'd be a DM slide within a week, to the point where I changed my WhatsApp profile photo to a photo of me and my husband, because I wanted people to know I'm not on the market. So I just feel like, if you're an adult, if you're sensible, there's a reason why we have gut feelings about things. And if your gut feeling is they don't serious, just follow your gut. There's enough women out there, or people you have an affinity with, to help you, that you don't necessarily need to always rely on people who could potentially be creepy. 1 minute, last question, can I do it? What would be your advice about references from toxic workplaces? I have removed where I can, but I have to use experience from my career. Gaps have been an issue. Went through nightmare compliance for months where I thought I'd lose a role. I also have a lot of self-confidence issues asking for recommendations. On the rare occasion when I'm not too scared to ask, love what you said so far, but doubt they would go for me pre-drafting. Sometimes you just have to own what's happened, right? Like, if you can ask people you used to work with for a reference, you can. If you can't ask them for a reference, then you're just going to have to be creative and not work at places that need to have your uninterrupted career history. Work for a smaller business, work for a startup, consult for a bit, freelance, build up credibility, and then go for roles that do not require that level of due diligence. You cannot change your past and you cannot change your reality. So you just need to be creative and you need to adapt. That would be my advice to you. We're at time. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to be back again in 2 weeks. Please click the Airtable link in the chat. I would love to hear your feedback. Thank you so much. Everyone who's job hunting, we wish you the best of luck. Please keep checking out the Hustle Crew newsletter that comes out every week. Please keep following Hustle Crew Live on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter for careers advice. And if you have a burning question you still want to ask, abadesi@hustlecrew.co. I will do my best to answer. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. See you soon.